Up next on Inside the SCCA, Atlanta Super Tour Preview. Welcome to Inside the SCCA. And of course, Atlanta Super Tour have Preview. A button press, so there's echo. We're going to fix that. I don't know what's with me and the echo these days, folks. I've been doing that a lot. Anyway, echo solved. I'm Brian Bielanski. We are doing Inside the SCCA. It is the Wednesday night before the Hoosier Racing Tire SCCA Super Tour at Road Atlanta. This will be round, fourth race of the year, which would make this rounds 7 and 8 coming up. And my guest tonight is none other than Josh Schmidt. Josh drives a B-Spec car. He is also the owner of Babyface Fabrication. Josh, welcome. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Last minute guest ask. Had someone kind of fall through at the last minute, and we're going to get them on eventually. Sometimes life gets in the way. And called up your wife, who I went to college with many, many moons ago, and said, hey, help me out. And she's like, I'll make him do it. So appreciate you. That's how it works, isn't it? You'd be surprised how many of my guests I get by talking to their wife or significant other first. It kind of cracks me.
You know how to do it.
It's been a day. It's been a day. So welcome to the show, and we're going to talk a bit later about Super Tour Road Atlanta. But every first-time guest on the show gets asked the same exact first question in varying ways. But essentially, the question is this: how did you get mixed up in this crazy sport that we love?
Great question. So this is the start of my third year road racing.
Okay.
Originally, I'm from Michigan. A circle track racer. Actually, it started before racing actual cars. Real cars. I was racing carpet oval RC cars before I could drive.
Awesome. I did that too.
License. Yeah, that was. Yeah, so I wish I would have known more then. Would have been a little bit better. But the older you get, the more you learn, the better you are. Whatever.
Yeah.
When it comes to setup and handling and so forth. So I got started in racing with the local DARE program.
Really?
A lot of people know DARE.
Absolutely.
A lot of the younger kids probably don't, right? So I think it's called something else nowadays. But anyways, so the officer gave us tickets to the local circle track. And that track in my hometown, it's actually in Auburn, Michigan. It's Tri-City Motor Speedway. It's a 1/4 mile, and there was also a 5/8 mile. It's actually dirt now. Last 2 years it got changed. It was asphalt. Sorry. I'm just laughing about that because never mind, inside joke between my wife and I. Asphalt,
Yeah.
Michigan thing.
Sure.
Laughing.
Sure.
Anyways, I'll get back to the story. So, before I could own a car, drive a car, whatever, my dad took me to Tri-City. We were watching, and I had my eye on a Mustang 4-cylinder class. We never bought it. But when I was finally old enough to have, my own job, pay for my own car,
right,
build my own car, I did it. First car was a 1976 Monte Carlo.
Okay.
So a big car, right? And it was actually pure stock. So you pretty much take out everything that burns.
Right.
All the interior, put a roll cage in it, go race. Well, that evolved into street stock, racing tires now, and then so I ran that for 1 year, and then we bought a sportsman car and went through that, and then I raced on a big track, 5/8 mile. And the cool thing about that track is they used to run ASA there.
Right. American Speed Association, I think, was what ASA.
Right, when it was the original ASA. Yeah. Exactly what it was. Mike Eddy. I was a fan of his, almost a neighbor, next town over. I met Jimmy Johnson and actually Adam Petty.
Okay.
There at that track. So that was cool.
So back in the day, way back in the day.
Anyways, so we get racing.
As I say, way back in the day, Matt Kenseth ran ASA, Dick Trickle ran ASA. There was a couple of other Wisconsin, Midwest, Wisconsin.
Mark Martin.
Yeah, Mark Martin, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois. So very cool.
Senecers. So it was a really cool series,
Yeah.
We liked watching that.
Cool.
So anyways, raced the sportsman car there at that track for about a half of a year before it shut down.
Gotcha.
I didn't win a feature there, but I did win a heat race. I'll take that,
Nice.
Because it was a big track. So we ended up getting a late model, and in the middle of all that, I went to Florida, New Smyrna, and took a chassis setup school. And I met a guy by the name of Rob Underwood, who was originally from Michigan, and he was working at the Richard Petty Driving Experience, a driving instructor. He's like, what you need to do is you need to move down here. Okay, so loaded everything up. We moved to Florida. So I was racing late models, New Smyrna, Orlando Speed World. And then I was also a driving instructor at the Richard Petty Driving Experience at the Walt Disney World Speedway.
Yep.
For a few years. So I got a lot of time. It was a lot of fun. So in the midst of all that, I decided to move to North Carolina. And I was also a driving instructor at then it was Lowe's Motor Speedway, but Charlotte Motor Speedway for a little bit. So we're talking early 2000s, early mid 2000s. And then I started working actually at a chassis shop, Hutcherson Pagan. They're no longer in business. Circle track stuff they would build back then. Winston Cup cars, the Cup cars, the Busch Series cars, when I was there. So it evolved from there to a body hanging shop where we would hang bodies, steel bodies on race cars. And then I got my first job at Kevin Harvick Incorporated, first NASCAR job. At Kevin Harvick Incorporated. I was there for 6 years up until he closed, won 2 truck championships, 40-some races, between the truck series and which is now the Xfinity series.
Right.
Back then it was the Busch series. That was a lot of fun. Good times there. So they shut down. I had a shop, fabrication shop in between Kevin Harvick Incorporated. Then I went to Stewart Haas Racing. At Stewart Haas Racing, I was a body hanger fabricator there. I was also there for 6 years. So I won Cup championship there, and I can't even remember how many races.
Right.
So I decided to leave there and open up my fab shop, Babyface Fabrication. So that's kind of how it evolved into road course racing. So my first, I want to say, road course customer was David Daugherty.
Oh, yeah.
I put a cage in a Miata for him. And then he brought me a Mini Cooper, the red one. And I'm like, what is this? He says, oh, yeah, it's B-Spec, something like this and that. I'm like, well, what is B-Spec?
Right.
4-cylinder? Crazy, right? Because I still did not know hardly anything about course racing. And so this was in 2020. And so I put the cage in his Mini Cooper. And he's like, yeah, look up, just Google Hoosier Super Tour.
Right.
And I look in my job before. I'm like, you mean to tell me you go to all these racetracks?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah. That is unbelievable. Mind blown, right?
Yeah,
Here we are.
Very cool.
Started my 3rd year racing, loving it. Wish I would have started road racing years ago. Yeah. So much fun. Unbelievable.
So let's talk for a second. I love it when people come on who've got backgrounds in other stuff. You've got the circle track background, you've got this fabrication background, you come from the NASCAR world, and now you've stepped into our world. Before you went to KHI, you said you worked for a chassis builder in North Carolina. Were all of those little chassis builders basically put out of business when NASCAR switched to the next gen type cars?
So a lot of teams started building their own chassis. So that kind of put the one-off mom and pop shops of, say, Hutcherson Pagan
right
out of business, the right way to put it. Just because the teams wanted to build their own thing.
Right.
Yes, it was still within the rule book.
Sure.
They wanted to do their own thing and, have it at their ability to do what they want when they want.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
So the new car is like a whole nother discussion or whatever, but it's its own thing.
Yeah. I mean, because now they all come off the same assembly line, essentially, right?
They do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Their center section, self-contained, front clip, rear clip, bolt on.
Yep. Yeah.
Talking the cup cars wise.
Right, exactly.
Infinity cars are like, what they used to be, but
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So how much of what you took from there, all of that experience, obviously, when you're building you've become kind of a B-Spec builder. I mean, I'm sure you build all kinds of cages, but I always see, I mean, Steve Ventrone, I think, brought his car down to you, and so you've got a reputation in this B-Spec world. When you go from working on cup cars to now working on these little tiny Mini Coopers and B-Spec cars, what did you bring with you from the NASCAR side into doing what you're doing for us?
Great question.
Drink. Whenever someone says great question, we drink.
Drink? Okay. Precision.
Okay.
Precision. Like I've always built stuff my whole life. Growing up as, a kid in the basement building things. And that's what I am. Precision, perfectionist. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's something for a cup car, a B-Spec car. It's still a race car. So I take all that into consideration when I build something. Is, I build one thing, and then if I'm going to build it again, how do you improve upon it?
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's the process, how I got there, or the finished product. I always try to make the next one better.
Right.
Doesn't matter what it is.
Right.
It could be a body. I've been hanging out with the bodies on late model stocks around our area, and it doesn't matter. It's like there's always something that you can make better, do better.
Sure.
Just strive for.
Yeah. Very cool. So I grew up working on the cars my dad had, and at age 16 I was his crew chief, which basically meant I was in charge of changing the oil and stopwatch. And then we got into building the Hondas and all that kind of stuff. So, over my time, I've seen a lot of janky stuff when it comes to cage building. Now, it's become much. It seems like the skill and the craft of the people we take our cars to has improved so much in the last 20, 25 years. And so has the expense, obviously. But you can't put a dollar figure on your safety. So, well, you can, but you shouldn't.
Right.
Have techniques changed at all,
Right.
or is it just that people have gotten better because now a lot of cars are getting cages put into them?
I think it's the fact, just evolution of people focusing on safety.
Yeah.
You're never going to be 100% safe.
Right.
But you strive for being safe, for safety, the whole thing. You're absolutely correct, though. For example, not naming any names, there was a scrutineer, a guy that was going to write a logbook, and he's like, "Hey, go see this guy. He has some welds that need to be ground down. I'm not going to issue him a logbook." I went and looked at it, and it took me about a week to get back to him and tell him to not hurt his feelings, but let him down and be like, "You got to cut this cage out. It's not safe."
Oh, wow.
So, and I explained to him why. And I said, "This is what we can do better," because he bought a store-bought cage, which is fine. As a cage builder, a store-bought cage is okay to an extent because, for example, a lot of times the main hoop isn't high enough because it might be built for a car that has the interior in it.
Right.
Right. So we're talking a couple inches. So that top of that make would be, up against the roof of the car.
Sure.
Where it should be, as close. Get it away from the driver as much as possible, right? So the driver doesn't make contact. Sure. So, long story short, he understood it, brought it to me. We got his car logbook done. He's at the racetrack. So safety is a big part of it. And I think, certainly with the new Cup car that came out, especially in my area, there is a lot of other fabricators out there now as well.
Right.
But I mean, just everybody's gotten better.
Right. Yeah. And back when I started doing this, there were a couple of store-bought cage manufacturers out there. And there weren't that many fabricators of cages, So you'd go to, a body shop and ask them to put in a cage. And because they're the only people who know what a welder is and maybe know how to use it. And that was a stepping off point. And then maybe you added some stuff to a store-bought cage to make it a little safer here or there. But most people, I don't think 20, 30 years ago, in mass, I mean, obviously there were really good professionals out there who were doing it professionally and knew exactly what to do. But in our kind of, stepping off point, there weren't a lot of people out there doing them. So our best choice was even starting with a store-bought cage. At least you started with something that was someone who designed it with a motorsports background. And then you had to hope it got installed correctly.
Right.
So.
Exactly. And that's the key point. It's, people will ask me, will I sell them a cage? No, I won't, because I want to weld it in. I don't want to go through and have a problem on their end.
Right.
And that's kind of like what I'm getting at is like, you don't want to, you just want to make sure they're going to be safe. If you sell them something, it's going to be safe.
Right. And it also was, if you lived near,
might be able to.
Yeah. If you live near Charlotte, if you live near Indy, if you live near LA, there were cage builders who were doing it. But if you lived in other parts of the country, there was nobody who really knew what they were doing. So, and I think more so now in other parts of the country, there are more people doing this that have a better idea of how to do it the right way. So, cool.
Right. Yep.
So you're now driving.
A lot of that is,
No, go ahead. A lot of that is.
A lot of that is, Facebook, social media, and they're able to see it and, we can do this.
Yeah.
For example, like Steve Introne, though, he's driven down twice from New Hampshire.
Right.
Left his truck trailer. I take him to the airport. I do his cage. He flies back down, drives it up, Yeah. And I'm grateful of that.
Sure. Sure. Now you're driving. You said you started driving about 3 years ago. Wish you would have done it a long time ago. How did you? When did you decide that this was the way you were going to decide to go have fun inside the car, on Sundays, Saturdays, and Sundays, rather than crawling around the inside of the car and building them on Monday through Friday?
Probably my first HPDE I did.
Okay.
At CMP.
Yeah.
I was like, holy cow. Blast. Yep. Really was.
Yeah.
And the one thing I want to mention is it's completely under an 80-degree difference between not just the obvious circle track racing and road course racing.
Right.
Other than the obvious racetrack. But I mean, just everything is different about it. And that's one thing I like too,
Give us a couple of points of the difference. Because there's folks that we race with who've never been in the paddock of a circle track.
Okay. The besides the cars are obviously they can be built different,
right?
But how they're set up, they're differences. But the road course racer, it's kind of fine line here. But like, if I get in the car, I can go run a lap. You get in the car, you go run a lap. We could have two separate lap times. Either one of us can be faster than one another, right? it's a little bit different over in the circle track world, right?
Yeah.
And a circle track racer doesn't want you to look at their car. They don't want you to see what you're doing, right? And over here, the road course world is, yeah, come on over, take a look. Let me help you out, this and that.
Yeah.
So that's cool. But both is hard racing. The one thing that I learned is the whole metal to metal contact thing. Road course, avoid it.
Right.
Unless we're bump drafting, avoid that. And then in the circle track world, you would spin a guy out to win a race.
Yeah.
That's the big one.
Yeah. And I don't want to, I try not to use the term that I love to use, but I'm going to use it. And I'm sure that if there's any of my circle track fans watching, they're going to yell at me. But, we've seen a lot more contact over the last 10 years, 15 years in SCCA and road racing than we have, when I started. And I refer to it as the NASCARification of motorsports. We've got kids who grew up watching NASCAR and seeing what happens at lots of different types of tracks, the chrome horn and when it happens, the broadcasters get all excited about it. It's the way it kind of works in a lot of circle tracks.
Right.
And then people come here, and it's not just the kids. Everybody says, "Oh, we've got too many kids who don't have the right." It's not just the kids. I've seen plenty of adults do the same dang thing, and they think that that's the that's the way it should be done, and it's not how we are supposed to do it here. And it's tough to fight against that, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. It was. I had to restrain myself in some instances that we're not circle track racing, we're road racing,
right. So
you got to think about it.
Yeah, definitely. So I love working on cars. I love wrenching cars. The cars I helped my dad build, the car I built for myself. I love driving race cars. What do you enjoy more? The satisfaction of a beautiful looking cage and a customer who when it rolls out the door, the satisfaction of hearing about a car that you put a cage into that's been in a big one and everyone's okay, or coming up, I used a shot of you standing on a podium at a Hoosier Racing Super Tour. Which part do you enjoy more?
All of that.
That's a cop out.
Because no, I'll go into detail, but all of that. So you never want to see your stuff wrecked.
Sure.
You don't ever want to see a wreck, period.
Right.
There was the one at VAR at the runoffs. I put the cage in it, and like I told them, I don't want to see it happen. Didn't want to see it happen. I was glad I was there to see it happen, but I'm glad everybody's okay and safe. And going back to making things better, how can we make it better?
Right.
So there's that side of it. But the other side is when I do a cage and that customer is happy and he goes out and wins with it, that is really where I get the gratification, is when they go out and win with it.
Yeah.
And I, from the driver's standpoint of it, is when I'm at the racetrack, I just focus on racing.
Sure.
And I go out there and try to do my best. Doesn't really matter where I'm at. And I try to be on the podium and win, right? Just like all of us do. But it's a little bit of everything, as a whole.
Yeah. So you mentioned the runoffs. Did you put the cage in Chris's car? Is that the one we're talking about that rolled over? Did you?
I did. That's it. Yeah.
I'm guessing you went back to look at everything after it happened, just to see how the cage held up, how the car held up. What did you find?
I don't want to say I was impressed, but I mean, I was very satisfied with it. And first thing I did when I walked up to it is I grabbed the seat.
Okay.
And I shook tried shaking the seat.
Right.
Seat didn't move.
Nice.
David always runs aluminum seats. I recommend aluminum seat. I have an aluminum seat in my car. It's what I recommend, just because of that reason. They're stout,
Sure.
That was the big thing, right? Because if the belts are tight, the seat didn't come loose.
Right.
Chances are the driver didn't really move.
Right.
But, you look for the cage flaps in any certain area, and in that case, it didn't. So it kind of just, I say it was like, I believe it was Ken Schrader at Talladega, the 25 Bud car.
Okay.
Looked identical to it.
Yeah.
It's in the Hendricks Museum. The front is knocked off. The back is knocked off. It's like, so you just take that and be like, okay, and move on.
Yeah. I mean, that cocoon is so just important, and I've, this is my third decade in the sport, and it's a little morose, to go and look at a car after it's been in a wreck of any kind. But I always look because there's
Right.
things to be learned, and I always find it interesting to see, did any of the welds crack? Is there anything that and then go back and look at my cage. Okay, did I do mine the same? Is mine the same way? And should it be different? Is there a brace that we can put in somewhere? Where were the fail points? You can almost learn as much from a failed cage as you can from a non-failed cage, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's always interesting to me to see, and I would love to go spend. I know that NASCAR has their R&D center. When a big wreck happens, they'll tow the cars back there, and they'll go over them with a fine-tooth comb and look at all the little bits and parts and see what helped and what didn't. I would love to have a chance to spend a day with them when they're going through that process and see what are you looking for? Why are you looking at this? And there's just whenever we stop learning, that's when we have problems, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's just like, the progression of the safety wall.
Right.
Wherever you think a car is not going to hit, a car is going to hit it.
Sure. Sure.
I remember a few years ago when Danica was racing and I was at Stewart Haas. She got hit somewhere in the left front, and basically where the foot box area was. Like if she would have been, let's say, a 6 foot tall man driving that car, like his feet would have been broken.
Sure.
But she was so tiny, like the footwell clapped, and you take that and you move forward and you know what change, or you try to decide what changes to make.
Sure.
For it safer.
Sure.
Make it safer.
So were you at Stewart Haas when Danica came to Stewart Haas? Or was that after you?
I was there while she was there.
Okay.
I guess I came after she did.
So
I think it was.
I always laugh at this. The first time when she first went to NASCAR and she got into her first wreck, and they saw her pull her hands off the steering wheel right before it hit the wall, and the broadcasters went crazy and was like, "Oh my God, she took her hands off the steering wheel," and all that, and they were so like, "Why did she do that?" And then explain it, and I'm like, and I just had to laugh because road racers have been doing that stuff for decades. You only have to snap off a finger once to realize that that's what you need to do. I just was like,
when you get to that point, you let go of the wheel because it's not going to matter.
Yeah, no, you got to stop driving at some point because it's driving you, So, all right, we're going to Road Atlanta this weekend. You're actually at Road Atlanta. You're in the paddock right now, linked up to us on the Starlink. So thank you. I won't. Yeah, thank you anyway for the Starlink. So racing starts Friday morning with qualifying. I guess we've just changed the schedule. Just changed now. Both sessions on Friday are qualifying sessions. What you raced Road Atlanta before, right?
I have. I absolutely love this place.
Yeah,
probably one of my favorite racetracks.
Yeah, yeah. So you're only 3 years into it, and you just started doing Super Tours. Was this year's your first Super Tour at Sebring?
it was officially. We went down to Sebring about 2 years ago and had some car failure, so we didn't race at all. So yes, so this year is my first official year of Super Tour.
Got it. What do you notice is the difference between I don't want to use the word regular, but a non-Super Tour SCCA event and the Super Tours? What's your take on that?
You just know the competition is going to be a little bit more fierce, I guess, if you want to say.
Sure.
A little bit more stout.
Sure. And you are in B-Spec in a time when it is as popular as it's ever been. There was a time when we thought B-Spec was going to be, I mean, it was on life support. And a couple of B-Spec drivers decided to get together and make sure that wasn't going to be the case. So I don't know that you were part of it when it wasn't popular. But now at most Super Tours on the East Coast, we won't talk about the West Coast because we're struggling out here a little bit still. But on the East Coast, you show up at a Super Tour with a B-Spec car, there's a good chance you got 10 or 12 cars at least to race with. So you've got some folks to measure yourself against when you go to a Super Tour. What do you find is the most fun part about that?
I guess that's to be determined. This is only my second Super Tour race, but inevitably, like, see how good you are.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like when Kyle Busch goes to the lower series, and that's, if Kyle Busch can do that with a truck, why can't you?
Sure. Absolutely. Road Atlanta is its own little beast there. What's your favorite part? Your favorite part of that racetrack, and then on the flip side, which part do you struggle on?
I struggle in 5 a little bit.
Okay.
But overall, I love this place.
Yeah. What about it?
It's fast. What do I love about it?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's fast. It's high commitment. You got to be committed. There's no hesitating. You gotta go.
Yeah.
Coming down the hill too wide. Left side tires at the edge. It's high commitment.
Yeah.
Got to respect it. That's the thing. You got to respect it.
Sure.
That's the one thing I'll say that I've learned over my racing career is you have to respect the racetrack. And this is definitely one of those racetracks you have to respect.
Yeah. And there's not a ton of throwaways at Road Atlanta. Even the simple corners lead on to really important straightaways. So, like turn 7.
Right.
There's nothing special about turn 7. But if you don't do it right, you're going to pay the price big time going into turn 10. And even more so now because it used to be before turn 10 was there, it was almost a little less important because if you weren't in front of anybody going into there was no turn 10, that you needed to be in front of someone to be able to get through 10, 11 nice to go up and under the bridge. It was so much more flowy and you didn't have to be quite as good coming out of 7 as you do now. Because if you screw up 7 now, you could be in a whole ball of mess when you get to 10 with other cars that you should have maybe been in front of to be able to do 10, 11 right. Because if you don't do 10, 11 right, now, which also shouldn't be a big deal. It's a 90-90 left-right, but now that's so important because you need that to go down under the bridge, down the hill, and get your speed to go towards turn 1. There's no time to rest because you got to do it all perfectly.
Right, exactly. Turn one, fast, just a little brush of the brake, right back on the throttle, up the hill.
Turn 1 was my problem.
Don't kill that speed. Don't kill that momentum.
Yeah. Turn 1 was my problem. I couldn't. That was when you say you've got to commit. I always felt like I needed to lift a little bit more. I couldn't convince myself that it was just a lift and just a blip. And again, if you don't get that right, you're going to have 3 or 4 cars that are going to pass you before you get to 3. And it's a driver's track. It really is. what?
I love this place.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to win a regional here.
Okay. Is there something as far as so I did it in a Honda Civic. Yeah, so when I raced there, it was in a Honda Civic, which I think probably has just slightly more horsepower than the B-Spec cars, not by much. What makes it difficult or easier in a low horsepower car like a B-Spec car?
It isn't, well, okay, so coming from circle track racing, driving a rear wheel drive car, bias ply to a front wheel drive radial, for me, that was a learning curve, learning curve. But in these cars, it's all the momentum and not killing that momentum.
Right.
You know, you mess up that momentum, lose that momentum, that lap's gone, possibly the next one. So
yeah,
that's the thing, is you just gotta go.
Yeah. With you know, and the wild card this year is you're on a new tire. Have you found that tire to be quick to learn for you guys?
I believe so. It is a little bit different, obviously, but I really only have one race on it. You know, it's Sebring, but I mean, I like it. You know, good tire for sure.
I'm pulling up the forecast. You probably already know it. What's the weather forecast for this weekend?
Tomorrow will be nice.
Okay.
Test day will be nice. Friday is gonna be wet probably.
Okay.
Wet in the morning on Saturday. Sunday should be great. I wish it would be great, sunny every day, but can't have every day.
Yeah. So one of the things I was hearing coming out of
just don't have a whole lot.
Yeah. As I say, one of the things I was hearing coming out of Sebring was that the rain tire, the new Goodyear rain tire, is pretty spectacular.
Yes, and again, like my road racing on rain tire in the wet is very little.
Yeah.
So I'm not really a good one to ask on that, but I haven't even raced on the Hankook wet tire.
Okay.
I haven't even raced on that really. So all I can say is it's the Goodyear tire is soft.
Yeah.
Got grip.
Yeah. So being new to road racing and relatively new, what part of your game do you try to work on every weekend now?
It's a good one. Is just try to get the most out of that tire.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's a spec car. You really can't do a whole lot with it, right?
No.
Wink, wink, nod, nod.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
Right. You can't. Motor stock, transmission stock. There's a spring rule. There's a spec sway bar and spec shock. There is the weights and the restrictors per car, but other than that, you got to get everything out of the tire you can.
Right. So cool. Beyond Atlanta, what's your plan for the year?
To run as many races as I can, right?
Yeah.
So I printed off the Southeast Division's schedule. I went through the list, which ones I want to do, there's like 14 of them. I'm going to try to do all 14 and then some, but in the Southeast region, as many as we can, and then do the June sprints, and then obviously the runoffs.
Cool.
Up in Wisconsin.
Cool. So, and you said it properly, Wisconsin.
Yep.
I
know.
So you're doing the whole Sark series?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. That's where I started doing most of my driving, is in that series. You know, great racetracks, Rebling Road Atlanta, CMP, Kershaw, I think is still part of, is Kershaw still on the list? Yep.
Yep.
And I think they make a stop at Daytona and obviously Sebring. So just a great series, a great part of the country for racing. I definitely it was funny when I moved to Atlanta from the north. I was like, I'm in a place where I could race all year round. I'm never leaving. And then I got married, and my wife's like, I want to go to New York. And I'm like, really? Do you really want to go to New York? I don't really want to go to New York. She's like, I grew up in Atlanta. We got to get out of here. And I'm like, but I just found racing nirvana. We can't leave. But I was in love, and we decided to go. And now we live in California, where we can also race all year round. So I'm back to racing nirvana. So I get it. Cool. So, all right. So you're based out of the Charlotte area, right?
I think we race. Yeah, just north of Charlotte in Kannapolis.
Okay. Yeah. Big time NASCAR country there. So if somebody wants to come and have you put a cage in your car and their car, help maybe add to their cage, how do they get in touch with you?
Easy. Babyfacefabrication.com. We have a Facebook page, website. Just look up Babyface Fabrication. Find me.
Cool. You're also on Facebook.
Babyfacefabrication@gmail.com.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. So, Josh, thank you. I appreciate you coming on at the last minute and helping us out here. Also want to say thank you to our sponsors who are helping us out this weekend for this episode, Racekeeper and Ray Esports. They are all been with us for a while now. If you want to get some more information about Racekeeper or Ray Esports, just go down the show notes. There's links there to all of that kind of stuff. We really appreciate all of what they do for us, and really good people behind them, behind those companies. So a big thank you to them. Also want to say hi to Brian Straczynski in the chat. He's right. There's 300 plus entries this weekend, 5 Formula Vs. And he says good fabricators are hard to find. He says and really stress out about making a racing cage more than perfect. Yeah, there's a lot of tedium to do that properly. So he says it's not just good welds, it's metallurgy and engineering principles. Yeah, there's a lot more that goes into making a cage, and people just think about bending a couple of pipes and roll and weld them together, right? Yeah. And then he says, good luck to you on the business. So Brian's a longtime watcher and supporter, so appreciate everything, having him here as well. All right, folks, that is going to do it for this episode of Inside Champ Car, or Inside the SCCA. See, I'm tired. I got the shows mixed up. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the SCCA. Thank you all for watching, and I've lost my little ditty here. If you like what you're hearing, subscribe to the RacingWire Podcast Network so you won't miss any episodes. It would also be great if you leave a comment, especially if it's a good one. Follow us on social media to find out who our next guest is, and leave a question on Twitter. It's @RacingWireNet. I'm Brian Bielanski. Have yourself a great weekend. Stay safe, and go play with cars.
I'm Dorsey Schrader, and when I'm on my way to a race, I'll listen to the SCCA podcast, Inside the Short Bus.
Inside the SCCA is a presentation of the RacingWire Podcast Network and Rule 15 Productions. This podcast is not affiliated with, endorsed, or sponsored by the Sports Car Club of America. The views expressed within are those of the host and our guests, and not that of the SCCA.